What's going on, everybody? It's Dr. Scott with the Full Body Fix, and we're going to do a little shoe talk today. Specifically, I want to cover the topic of minimalist shoes, barefoot training, and specifically talk about it in regards to weightlifting, training, and running. Kind of those main sort of big fitness topics in regards to footwear. What's the proper footwear to wear for you, and sort of how to navigate this topic. So right off the top, we need to talk about the history of the minimalist footwear movement, why it came about, and really what happened is around 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, there started to be a shift in especially the running community. Basically, long distance runners have a high incidence of injury. If you've done any distance running at all, you know runners get hurt. As a sports chiropractor, I see a lot of these folks in my office. We try to address that obviously from a manual therapy standpoint, from a chiropractic standpoint, but at the end of the day, if there's an underlying root problem, we need to address that. In this case, we're talking about shoes and footwear. So what happened is that if you kind of look at the short history of running, a lot of times, back in the day, more cushioning, more stability in the bottom of a heel was better. Considered better because you could heel strike, you could run faster, and it would absorb the shock from the heel strike. The problem is, from an evolutionary standpoint, we've actually been designed as humans to land on the forefoot and spring off using the tendinous reflex of the Achilles, the calf, and the rest of our muscles and soft tissues. And so when we started putting ourselves in these really cushioned heels and started heel striking, that shock absorption started getting transferred up the chain, and you get things like plantar fasciitis, shin splints, IT band tendonitis, low back pain, etc. So like I said, around 2008, 9, 10, in that range, this idea of kind of getting back to the basics of trying to run with a natural stride became popular. There was a very popular book called Born to Run by Christopher McDougall that came out, something I read and actually started getting me thinking about this topic. And then you pair that modern shoe that has a lot of cushion and stability alongside the fact that from a human locomotion standpoint, we are always on hard level floors. Whether it's pavement, whether it's cement, whether it's thin carpet on top of cement or hardwood, we're always on hard level floors, never challenging the muscles of the foot, especially because we're wearing basically these functional casts to try to protect us from injury. But the problem is all that combination of hard level floors and supportive shoes creates a weak foot. And a weak foot that is also oftentimes crowded by narrowing, which can lead again to the same kind of problems we talked about, plus Morton's neuroma, plus pelvic tilt like we talked about in a previous video. And so you have a lot of these things sort of set up working against us. So let's talk about some solutions. Well, one of the things I'm really big on is slow transition. If you are trying to transition from a traditional shoe to something more minimalist or like a zero drop, which we'll talk about in a second, I always recommend doing some prehab. So you want to do some foot strengthening drills, and I'll link to that video. You always want to do some calf lengthening, because oftentimes if you're in a really thick, chunky heel, your Achilles and calf have been shortened over time. So we're going to start lengthening that Achilles and calf so that when you do start going into something that's a little bit more flat and minimal, that you're not setting yourself up for injury. And that's the big message, the big takeaway is if you are going to transition slow, do it smartly, get your foot strong, get things moving well in the ankle and lower leg, and then start talking about shoes. So speaking of shoes, I'm sponsored by Strike Movements. They're definitely going to talk about Strike Movements. Let's look at one of the traditional ones here. They've got the Chill Pill Transit, which is basically the Chill Pill with the Transit outsole. These things I love because they're a 4mm heel to toe drop. So let's talk about heel drop real quick. Traditional running shoe with a lot of stability and cushion may have up to 20 inches of heel to toe drop, meaning you're actually standing on a heel and not even realizing it. All the Strike Movements are 4mm or less. These mids are actually 2mm. So basically almost zero drop, which zero drop would be no height difference between the heel and the forefoot. They're also very flexible, right? You want your shoe to be able to basically curl up into a ball. If it can't do that, it's probably too stiff, too rigid. So you can see these are very flexible, but you still get that rubber grippy support so that when you're in the gym moving around, you still have enough, anti-slippage. The last part is a toe box. So our foot naturally needs to be able to spread wide so that our feet can feel the surfaces around us, and also so that we don't get crowding of the metatarsal heads. The crowding can create a lot of different problems. So if you're in narrow shoes all the time, definitely something to look at changing that up. When it comes to a flexible zero drop shoe with a wide toe box, the best example I could show you is Vivo Barefoot. This is a company I started wearing their casual shoes because it's a basic aesthetic that you can get away with, I think, in most workplace environments. I've even worn these specific loafers to weddings, and nobody's the wiser, especially with guide shoes. And if you see, again, I'm talking about that curl, softness, that's how flexible your shoe can be, and potentially, if you get there, should be. And then the other thing, like I said, the wide toe box is a much more natural position for the foot to be in. So when it comes to making that transition, if you're going to do that, definitely, like I said, reinforce by getting the foot muscles strong. So there's muscles in between the bones of the foot. You want to get those really strong with foot drills. Make sure the calf and Achilles are lengthened. And then go slow with it. Make sure you get a transitional shoe. Transitional shoe might look something like this, where it's still maybe 8 millimeters of heel drop. This is my old Brooks Green Silence, which you can't actually buy these anymore, and I'm still hanging on to them because when I do run, I really like to still run in these. Again, these ones were really flexible, wider toe box, only I think 6 to 8 millimeters of heel drop, but that would be more of a transitional before you go to something that's totally zero drop. Speaking of transitioning, a lot of people jumped into these, the Vibram 5 fingers. These can be, I think, really good, but this should be your last stop, right? Because these are basically just preventing you from getting cuts or puncture wounds in your foot. There's no stability, no support, just a little bit of a rubber sole and a little bit of cloth on top. If you get used to it, these can be fine. I know that there was some controversy when they settled the lawsuit, basically when they got called out for their health claims. But frankly, the whole point is just to get to a point where you're walking and hiking more naturally in these. But I think the main thing, again, to take home is think about if you're a heel striker as a runner and then you put these on and went out and ran your normal mileage, heel striking, you're going to get hurt really quickly. Because these are meant to be running completely different, and they're meant to be a midfoot strike type of shoe. Last topic of the day is weightlifting platform shoes. So traditional Olympic lifting shoes actually have a raised heel, which is the exact opposite of what I've just been talking about. So what do we do with these? Well, if you have good mobility, stability, strength, you never need to get these if you're not planning on being a competitive Olympic lifter. However, if you're going down that competitive or serious Olympic lifting route, I actually do recommend getting a pair. I went with the lowest heel I could find. That's a shoe called the Innovate Fast Lift. It's still pretty flexible in the toe box. The heel obviously is not. And that's on purpose, because when you're lifting heavy weights, whether in a snatch or clean and jerk, you want actually a very firm, stable support, because you're doing something you wouldn't normally do. Is it absolutely necessary to have a lifting shoe if you're getting into CrossFit? No. You can get away with really any kind of shoe that you want to, whether it's a strike movement or an Innovate regular, even your favorite Metcons or Nanos. I hope that helped answer some of your questions about the minimalist footwear topic. It's been Dr. Scott with the Full Body Fix. We'll see you next time.